mammoth undertaking. 1 million vaccinations a day, apparently, to meet the Prime Minister's ambitious target. So can it be done? And is it a distraction from the question of whether Boris Johnson broke lockdown rules himself?
The Prime Minister was pictured hosting a Downing Street quiz, unmasked, last December, and is facing growing calls to resign, though not from Labour. Let's speak to Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy. Very good morning to you. Nice to see you this morning. Is that right? That we saw Ian Blackford, leader of the SNP in Westminster, very concisely, as he always does. He's a great performer, sort of saying, listen, he needs to resign, and his own party need to put in a vote of no confidence. Am I right to think that Labour are not at the point yet of calling for the Prime Minister's resignation?
Well, it's another day, another controversy. The Prime Minister socially mixing at a time when the rules in London, the Tier 2 rules, says you shouldn't socially mix and you shouldn't meet up with more than one person. And it appears that there were people huddled around computers. The Prime Minister's not Anne Robinson, he's the Prime Minister of the country, and he appears to have been conducting some kind of quiz. So he should come to the House and explain himself. But I mean, look, this is a very, very serious time. The important news this morning is that the population has to get boosted. And so this isn't about playing politics, calling for resignations when everyone knows that the opposition can't really control that. But it is about the Prime Minister, who is the public health lead in chief, explaining how he has met the rules, because we can't live in a country where, rule makers make the rules, break the rules, and sort of are impugned, frankly, because that sends the message to the population that it's not important to follow the rules.
It also sends the message to the population that Labour don't think it is that important an issue if they won't call for the Prime Minister's resignation, surely.
I think that most of the country want a serious opposition and a serious government. They don't want politicians like me coming on.
Is this a serious breach, though? I suppose that's is this a serious potential breach? There is an inquiry, of course. Are you waiting for the outcome of the inquiry? What is it that Labour's waiting for? Because I suppose the interesting thing is that if Labour and others are saying that this is really serious, that laws were broken, that the Prime Minister, they shouldn't have one rule for Downing Street and one rule for the rest of the country, well, then how much more does it take?
We don't know. I mean, what we do know is that the parties seem to breach the rules, and this quiz appears to breach the rules. But you know, like I do, that the picture is confused. The Prime Minister, I'm afraid, has a problem with telling the truth. And so we can't be clear.
Okay.
The Prime Minister did not subject himself to questions yesterday, and that's why we say he should come to the House and explain himself. David
Lammy, just be really clear with us. You're talking about Boris Johnson not being clear. Just be clear. Do you think Boris Johnson should remain in his position as Prime Minister?
I think he should have gone ages ago.
So you do think he should? So you think he should resign?
I've just said to you, I think he should have gone ages ago.
So why can't you then say? Why don't you then say? I'm really puzzled. If you think he should have gone ages ago, why don't you come out and say, we think Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, should resign?
We've got a Prime Minister in office who, frankly, because of his behaviour, there's a risk that we in the opposition are calling for his resignation every week.
We've lost him.
No,
here he is.
And they want us to help ensure that the population get boosted. Okay. So I'm doing my job. What's important is the Prime Minister now does his.
Can I put something to you that Andrew Pearce sort of said that maybe behind the reason Labour aren't calling for his resignation? What is the situation of Christmas parties around that time and gatherings in the Labour Party? Is there some internal searching going on as we speak to make sure that your slate is clean?
I'm not aware of that whatsoever. The rules were very, very clear at the time.
The rules were clear, but the question is, of course...
Can I just say at the time, I was separated from my family for 2.5 weeks over Christmas last year because I was complying with the rules.
Was Keir Starmer, have you spoken to Keir Starmer? Are you certain that those on the shadow front bench, everybody adhered to the rules? Because one of the suggestions is that the reason you can't go as far to call for the Prime Minister's resignation is that you're still trying to find out whether any of your colleagues broke the rules themselves?
I think that's balderdash. Don't know where that comes from. Total nonsense.
Are you confident that no one broke the rules in the Labour Party?
As confident as I can be, because as a party, as a movement, we took the rules very, very seriously. We saw the people dying in care homes. We saw the seriousness of this, certainly here in London. Of course, there were slightly different tiers across the country, but in London, from what I could see, people were taking the rules very seriously indeed.
OK, let's talk about what's happening right now. We are in level 4. And just to be clear, that means that there is a high risk of or rising level of transmission. And previously, level 4 included social distancing measures to be continued. This time around, social distancing measures are not being put to the Commons. Mask wearing as mandatory in public transport and theatre venues and all that sort of thing, and COVID passports when entering these places is part of it. Now, there are 60 Tory MPs who appear to be vehemently against this. Without Labour, Boris Johnson could suffer an enormously humiliating defeat. Why is Labour supporting the Prime Minister on this?
Because we're a serious party. It's all shoulders to the wheel to ensure that the population is boosted at this time. And it is important that there are some restrictions. Look, we said all along that we didn't believe that the Prime Minister was right in getting rid of mask wearing, which is continuing in many countries across the world. And of course, it's right that in entering large venues, you should show your vaccination status or indeed take a lateral flow test. That seems perfectly
Does it go far enough, Mr Lammy, then? It's interesting. I'm curious to know, do you think that social distancing should be part of the measures, part of Plan B? Because they're not. Do you think they should be?
Well, look, we are grateful that the scientists have been made available to the Labour Party. It's not yet clear the nature of the severity of the disease. If you get it, that will become clearer in the next week to 10 days. But it is important that we put these new restrictions in place, Plan B as it were, because of course what we know is there's a delay. It's only weeks later that you see the effects of that. So we have to be cautious. Okay. I think these are a balanced set of proposals, and they're proposals that we had been calling for, let's remember this, for weeks and weeks and weeks. So we've been ahead of the government on Plan B. It would be bizarre if we didn't support that tonight.
Can I just say one final question about the restrictions? Are you now in favour, David Lammy, of vaccine passports? Because in the past, you've said they don't sound very and don't feel very British. So are you saying they are very British now?
Well, more in sorrow than in anger. On balance, we do think at this time it's important in big venues that people are able to show their vaccination status. That's a reasonable request given the mutation that we're facing.
What would you say to those people that choosing not to have the vaccinations and feel, well, that's unjust and creating a vaccine apartheid in this country?
Well, I say with all good faith and good conscience that I don't think I would be doing my job if I didn't say that I've been double vaccinated and I've had a booster, and it is my recommendation that you do this because this will save lives. That's my view. That's the view of the official opposition. And it's really important that we don't play politics with this, that we're as responsible as we can be.
All right. David Lammy from the Labour Party, thank you so much for joining us this morning.